Joann Hattie's Visible Learning presented the biggest ever collection of research into what actually worked in schools to improve children's learning. Not what was popular, but what actually produced the best results in terms of improving learning and educational outcomes. Now, in this latest book entitled Visible Learning and the Science of How We Learn, Joann Hattie has joined forces with cognitive psychologist Greg Yates. This book explains the major principles and strategies of learning, outlining why it can be so hard sometimes and yet easy on other occasions. Visible Learning and the Science of How We Learn consists of 31 short chapters organized into 3 parts: Learning Within Classrooms, Learning Foundations, and Know Thyself. Now let me share with you some of the most interesting chapters of the book. In Chapter 1, Hattie summarizes the ideas of Willingham simply. Our brains are not designed to think. They are designed for moving, learning words, reading people, and social situations. They are not good at organizing, retaining, and using the kind of information that we value in school. Of course, our brains are made for learning. Children learn to walk and talk. But the thing is, we're brilliantly good at processing sensory stimulus and not so good at acquiring and using the kind of knowledge required to become academically successful. We have to understand how the brain uses information in order to help the brain to store and use it effectively. This thesis is well summarized by Hattie, and indeed has led to a strong movement in education in support of a core knowledge curriculum. This is about giving children knowledge and making them practice that knowledge. For we cannot educate children without building confidence and enticing them into being interested in building a strong, positive, and healthy relationships. In Chapter 2, entitled Is Knowledge an Obstacle to Teaching?, Hattie suggests that highly knowledgeable experts tend not to make the most effective teachers. In fact, being an expert in a subject has no impact whatsoever on attainment. He is keen to stress, however, that teacher's subject knowledge still needs to be secure, but not so secure that it creates an empathy gap in which the teacher simply cannot understand why the students might struggle. What is of critical importance is being able to view learning through students' eyes and being able to explain with great clarity the steps required to become skilled. It is therefore important to note that being an expert teacher requires not so much expert subject knowledge as expert pedagogical knowledge. Part 2 covers a range of learning foundations. Common myths of teaching and learning are addressed, critiqued, and debunked as appropriate. In Chapter 21, it is being asked, are your students really digital natives? Yes and no. They won't become an Albert Einstein simply by sitting in front of the computer. But on the other hand, they are born on a technological world and can figure out how to use it well. We have to bear in mind that computers will never and can never take the place of a good teacher. Aside from the fact that children need guidance in order to be able to learn. Saying that knowledge need not be taught because children can simply Google it is a woefully inadequate way of educating children. Google cannot process that knowledge in memorable ways. Having said all of this, computers are a significant part of children's life and an important go-to tool for information as well as modes of presentation. Children's seeming expertise on computers is evidence of the time spent practicing on them. And Hattie has pointed out all along that if you practice something with a view to reaching a goal, you tend to get better. However, these skills, impressive as they are not a substitute for knowledge acquisition, and children need to learn how to process knowledge in order to understand it. A computer cannot do this. In Part 3, Chapter 29 and 31 provide good overviews of neuroscience work on our conscious and unconscious brain. The advantages and disadvantages of having much of our decision-making being automated are discussed with relevance to learning. The last chapter discusses why we put more value on learning when we put in effort. All in all, the book is a good resource for teacher educators and educators with some background on the learning sciences. Some chapters will be daunting and require scaffolding for people who come into teaching with limited knowledge on how learning works. Finally, the language used in the book is generally conversational, but the content are still sufficiently academic.